Okay, so have you ever, like, been at a party, chatting with someone new, and there's that vibe, but you can't quite tell, is it just you or are they actually into you?
Happens to the best of us.
I know, right? It's like everyone wants to know those secret signs of attraction.
Exactly.
So today we are diving deep, like deep into particularly how women might be saying, hey, I kind of like you, without actually, saying the words.
The unspoken language of attraction.
Yes. And our guide for this little adventure is this fun piece. It's called 5 Things Women Do When They Like a Guy. Kitschy, right?
Straightforward. Gets right to the point.
Totally does. But before we even get into it, gotta add the disclaimer.
Of course.
Like, this isn't a magic crystal ball to decode every woman's mind. Relationships are complicated.
Absolutely. This is more like, think of it as a magnifying glass, It's going to help you see certain things a bit clearer, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Human connections, they're messy.
The messiest. Okay, so this article, right off the bat, it debunks some pretty common assumptions. We're talking about those big romantic gestures, or like the constant texting, always being glued to your phone. This deep dive suggests women often rely on way more subtlety.
Yeah, it's like they're playing chess, not checkers.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
So why do you think that is? Why the subtlety?
Well, you got to think about societal expectations, right?
Okay.
There's this unspoken rule even now where women are often encouraged to be less direct, to play it cool.
Oh, 100%. Play it cool. Don't want to scare them off.
Right. So they end up relying on these more nuanced signals.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how many misconnections happen because of it.
Totally. Because we're so busy trying to play it cool that maybe we're missing the signals right in front of us. Okay, so let's jump into these subtle signs.
Let's decode them.
Yes. This first one really stood out to me, and it's this whole jealousy thing.
Ooh, juicy.
I know, right? But before anyone freaks out, this isn't about the kind of possessiveness you see in, established relationships.
Right. Not the green-eyed monster, no.
Exactly. It's much more subtle, more like a shift in energy, maybe pulling back a bit when you're paying attention to someone else.
It's that, wait a minute, what's going on here kind of feeling.
Like, if you ever notice that when you're, like, even just talking to someone and then you glance at someone else? And,
Yeah, and suddenly they're a little quieter.
yes. Or they're, like, not as engaged in the conversation.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
you've breached this unspoken connection. And at this stage, they might not even be consciously aware of it themselves. It's just an instinctive reaction.
It's like that gut feeling you get when you see someone you're into flirting with another person, but it's amplified because at this point, you're not even really a thing yet.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. The article points out that it's not about ownership or possessiveness at this point. It's more about that initial spark of connection that she might not even be fully aware of yet.
It's like, hey, I was vibing with you, what's going on? But internally.
Exactly. It's all happening beneath the surface.
Oh, so much to unpack there. Okay, let's move on to this next one, which I'm sure many people have seen firsthand. The article calls it the catch me looking good phenomenon.
Classic.
Oh, yeah. And it's all about, surprise, surprise, a woman putting in some extra effort with her appearance when she's around someone she's interested in.
I mean, it's biology 101, right? We want to look good for the people we're attracted to.
Totally.
It's like peacocks with their feathers.
It's true. It's like this primal instinct to, like, put your best foot forward.
Exactly. And it makes sense, when you think about it from an evolutionary perspective. We're naturally drawn to people who we find visually appealing.
Oh, for sure. And it's not always like a complete head-to-toe makeover. Sometimes it's the smallest things.
Absolutely. It's the subtle cues that really matter.
Like maybe she's wearing that color you complimented before, or she styled her hair differently.
Exactly. Or maybe she's just glowing a little bit brighter when you're around. It's all about those subtle shifts that can speak volumes. It's those little details. And speaking of effort, the source also mentions strategic coincidences. Those moments when it's like, oh, hey, you're here too, but deep down, you're kind of wondering.
If it's really a coincidence.
Exactly, like suddenly bumping into you at your gym even though they live across town.
Right. It's like those scenes from romantic comedies playing out in real life, but instead of a bookstore, it's like the frozen food aisle. Makes you think, are they really just grabbing those peas? Or...
Like, did they time that grocery run perfectly?
Exactly. It's like they become like amateur detectives figuring out your routine.
Right. It's like they're playing a fun little game of how to subtly cross paths with my crush. And you know what's interesting? This ties into like a real psychological principle, the scarcity principle.
Okay, the scarcity principle. Tell me more.
So basically it suggests we put a higher value on things that are, rare, hard to get. Like, think about it. You'd probably be more intrigued by someone who seems to have a full life, not just waiting around for your text.
100%.
Oh.
It's like you want what you can't have.
Right. That air of mystery, that busy life, it's appealing. So if someone's constantly available, it might make you wonder, don't they have anything else going on?
Right. But then on the other hand, if someone's like always glued to their phone, instantly replying,
It kind of loses its charm, doesn't it?
it does. It's like,
Ah.
oh, so I'm the most interesting thing happening in your life right now, but like, no thanks.
Exactly. The scarcity principle suggests that our attention, our time, it holds value because it's not unlimited. So when someone chooses to share that with you, especially when they're busy, it means something.
It's like they're saying, hey, you're worth prioritizing, even if it's just for a quick coffee or a quick text back.
Exactly. It's about those small gestures that show they're making an effort. And that leads us to another fascinating point the article brings up, the whole responsiveness thing.
Oh yeah, responsiveness, because we're all living in this like digital age now where everything's instant. So how does that play into attraction?
Right. It's like, does a quick reply mean they're really into you, or are they just always on their phone? And conversely, does a delayed response mean they're not interested, or are they just, taking the time to actually craft a thoughtful reply? It's tricky.
It's so true, because like part of me thinks, okay, if they take like 3 days to respond to a simple text, maybe they're just not that interested.
Right. But then there's that other part of you that's like, well, maybe they're just being really thoughtful and, want to give a good reply.
Yes, exactly. It's like, are they crafting a masterpiece over there? Is it going to be like a sonnet?
Right. A work of art. But seriously, though, it does make you wonder, because back in the day, before instant messaging, you had to wait for a phone call or a letter.
Oh, totally. The anticipation was real.
It's true. So maybe this whole instant gratification thing is ruining romance?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I guess it's all about finding that balance, right? Because on the one hand, you don't want to seem desperate, but you also don't want to be playing games and waiting like a week to respond on purpose.
Exactly. And that's why it's important to remember, like you said earlier, these are just clues, not guarantees.
Right. It's like this isn't a science, unfortunately.
Human behavior rarely is.
Sadly.
Yeah.
Because as much as we'd love to like crack the code of attraction,
It's not that simple.
it's so not. And I think this is a good time to like reiterate that this whole deep dive, it's not about turning us into like relationship detectives obsessing over every little detail.
Right. It's more about like being a little more aware, a little more mindful of the signals people might be sending.
Exactly. Because what might be flirting to one person?
Could just be friendly banter to another.
Exactly. And I think that's why at the end of the day, nothing beats good old-fashioned communication.
100%. If you really want to know how someone feels, ask them.
It's true. Like sometimes being direct is the most attractive thing you can do. But hey, it's still fun to be aware of these subtle signs, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like having this little window into the psychology of attraction.
It's fascinating.
Right.
And it reminds us that sometimes, the most meaningful connections, they happen in those subtle moments, those unspoken exchanges.
So true. Well, this has been super insightful, but before we wrap up, got to leave our listeners with something to ponder. So today we focused on how women might signal interest, but what about the guys?
Ooh, good question.
Right, how do their signals differ? Or are they actually surprisingly similar? Food for thought, everyone.
It's a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.
It really is. But until next time, happy observing everyone. And remember, communication is key.
And don't overthink it too much. Have fun out there.